I did want to react to this news here, which sort of has been blowing up online from what I can tell. And this is regarding the whole, public media situation, right? So we know that the federal government cut a bunch of funding for PBS as well as NPR. And so I found it very interesting that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting very, very recently announced that they would be shutting down because, if you want to know the backstory of the whole PBS and NPR thing, and I think it's fair to share this information because there's been a lot of misinformation regarding this situation, what cutting funding to PBS and NPR would actually do, because people have been sort of fear-mongering out there, right? They've been saying like, this means that we're going to lose shows like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood and those types of things are going to get shut down, no more Caillou, all that stuff, because, PBS and NPR is losing funding. Well, that's not really entirely the truth because NPR and PBS, they don't get the majority of their funding from the federal government, actually. They get the majority of their funding from viewers like you, like like those little bumpers at the end of each episode of PBS Kids Show or whatever, and viewers like you, thank you. Like that's because the majority of their funding actually comes from either wealthy or non-wealthy donors, and so that's actually how PBS and NPR proper get the majority of their funding. And when I say proper, I mean like the national organizations, right? Like the nationwide company, not individual NPR or PBS stations. So the money that they get from private sources, not public money, that money is what is used for things like the production of television shows, the maintaining of the majority of channels and things like that. When it comes to public money and public funds, that money is basically used to fill up the gaps. There are a lot of smaller markets that just don't have the capacity or the ability to to make enough money from local donors in order to survive. And so for those stations, they get federal funding. And so that's sort of what is being cut here with this new kind of like spending policy with the bill that got passed through Congress. Now, in light of all this, because I knew that, getting rid of the federal spending for NPR and PBS would not affect the majority of NPR and PBS stations. I knew that it wouldn't affect production. So I was like, well, hold on, this is a bit odd, right? The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is getting shut down. But I did a few minutes of research and it makes a whole lot more sense now. So let's go through this article. This is from NBC News. It says Corporation for Public Broadcasting says it will shut down after Congress cut money. Currently, the CPB helps support more than 1,500 locally owned NPR and PBS member stations. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting announced Friday that it will begin shutting down weeks after Congress canceled previously approved funding for the nation's steward of public media access. The CPB said in a statement that it will begin an orderly wind down of its operations after nearly 60 years with the support of the federal government. It said that most staff positions will conclude with the close of the fiscal year in September 30th. A small team of employees will remain through January 2026, it added. It did not specify how many people in total were being laid off. Despite the extraordinary efforts of millions of Americans who called, wrote, and petitioned Congress to preserve federal funding for CPB, we now face the difficult reality of closing our operations, the corporation's president and CEO, Patricia Harrison, said in a statement. CPB remains committed to fulfilling its fiduciary responsibilities and supporting our partners through this transition with transparency and care. Now, this sounds really bad, and that's actually what I thought. Like, when I first saw this, I was like, this is actually pretty bad. That like one of the key organizations when it comes to PBS and NPR is getting shut down is it's getting shut down with the lack of funding, and I thought it wouldn't affect production in any way. Well, turns out that is still true. So I went to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting's website. They actually have this little splash video here. We could take a look at this. I actually haven't seen this yet.
The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is a private, nonprofit corporation funded by the American people. CPB was first authorized by Congress in the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967. As the steward of the federal appropriation for public media, CPB invests taxpayer dollars in a strong public media system. By statute, more than 70% of CPB funding goes to locally operated and controlled public radio and television stations, supporting more than 1,500 stations nationwide. Funding includes supporting educational media and resources for learners of all ages through programs such as Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and filmmakers and producers such as Ken Burns and Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., and up-and-coming filmmakers from across the country. CPB supports trusted local, regional, national, and international news and information. Funding to CPB enables the essential infrastructure for our nation's emergency alert system. By design, public media's funding comes from many sources, but CPB is the largest single source of funding for public radio, television, and related services. CPB funding provides the public part of the public-private partnership that defines public media in America.
If you actually go back here, they specifically don't mention that they specifically send funds towards the production of national programs. You can see that right here.
Funding includes supporting educational media and resources for learners of all ages through programs such as Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
So basically it says that they make these programs accessible for Americans, but they're not actually funding the production of those programs. They're just making them accessible to people through television and through radio. So they are primarily just a terrestrial funding company, but also they funnel money from the federal government to the United States. It actually says it here. It says CPB is the steward of the federal government's investment in public broadcasting and the single source of funding for public radio, television, and related online and mobile services. Right? And so it makes total sense then that CPB is getting shut down, because if you're not sending any federal funds to PBS or NPR for public media, then what's the point of the company existing, right? Because they're not receiving anything and they can't give anything away. It's just like they're just gonna sit there doing nothing. So that sort of I think that from that perspective, it totally makes sense that the corporation was shut down. And I think honestly, it's no longer needed if there are no longer any taxpayer funds going towards PBS and NPR. I will say they certainly could have kept on going and saying, hey, we'll take donations and things from viewers and donors and stuff. And I think that actually could have worked quite well. I'm not sure why they didn't decide to do that, but hey, here we are, clearly. And it's not like NPR and PBS stations can't continue to take donations on their own. The CPB was never really needed, I would say. It just streamlined things a little bit more. So instead of the federal government giving money to NPR in one bucket and PBS another, they just gave the money to CPB and then let them all sort that out.